All right, now let's talk about Keith Law. So today, I should say yesterday, but we were in the middle of the show. So he came out with his annual farm system rankings. He had the Cardinals at number 13, and that's really good, especially good when you consider, they've been graduating, people to the majors, and 13 is better than anybody in the NL Central except for the Pirates, who I would hope that they'd have a better farm system than the Cardinals because they haven't tried to win a ball game since like 2015, maybe 2000. I think 2015 is the last year they actually tried to win a game. So I would hope that with all the tanking, that they would have a higher rated farm system. So the Cardinals come in at number 13. They were number 11 last year, so they dropped a little. No big deal because Dylan Carlson, among others, graduated. So the Pirates are 6th, the Cubs are 16th, Cincinnati's 19th, Milwaukee 26th. So some of the stuff they've done is catching up with them because when you make trades, a lot of trades in season, and I've praised that Milwaukee front office, and I still would. For them, it makes sense to do this. They always find a way to replenish pretty quickly. But anyway, Keith Law wrote, and I quote, "The Cardinal system is surprisingly filled with high-ceiling guys as the team has changed its approach in the draft in the past few years. They lost their first and second round picks in 2017. Then they returned the next year with what seems like a brand new philosophy, which is to aim high, which has worked so far with 2 of their 4 first-round picks, Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker, with a third, Zach Thompson, still showing potential but not results. They have a lot of depth and potential in non-regulars, middle relievers, platoon guys, bench pieces, behind the 7 or 8 high-ceiling guys that top the system." So that's a really positive review of what they have, and I really appreciate what he said at the end because we all focus in on, as we should, the Gormans and the Walkers and the Liberators, who they didn't draft them, obviously, but still he's a big part of their farm system and the future. But you know how you really get a good team? Of course, you need those big guys, the ones you've invested so heavily in as far as the draft and development, for them to come through. But you fill out your team. If you also have guys in your system that can do like a really good job as like platoon players or relievers or like he said, bench pieces, that's when you got something cooking. When you can actually put a bench together and a bullpen together with people that you drafted and developed, rather than maybe overspending for someone who really won't provide much more help, if any. So I think they've got a good balance there because I like hearing about they've got pieces down there that will really, really help their depth moving forward. That's good because we've learned about that. Depth is a positive thing. It's very, very good to have it.
As you read that, I was thinking, okay, that would be the Daniel Descalsos that we've seen come through in the past that were depth pieces on a winning team that you didn't have to go and overspend for, right?
Right.
Not saying Skip Schumacher's a utility piece, but he was a guy who you developed within your own system and became a winning ball player and also helped you in various roles win on winning teams. Those are the guys I think that you're talking about there that this group needs to put together.
I'm going to read you a Keith Law description, summation of a Cardinals prospect, and then I want you to tell me who he's talking about.
Okay.
This player is a, quote, thick-bodied, strong kid who has power and handles the bat very well, making up for merely average bat speed with his ability to get the bat head to the ball even inside. He's a well below average runner who's limited to, he mentions a position, but the plus power and patience could make him a regular there. Who is he talking about?
He describes a big shooter, as we would say.
Well, yeah, but not the biggest of shooters, but a big shooter nonetheless.
Okay, I was going to say, it sounds like Luke and Baker.
Shooter.
But no, remember.
He actually said something about Luke and Baker later on.
Okay.
Because he had another piece about their top 20 prospects, and I don't want to give away everything he wrote because it's a subscription service, and I try to respect that. And they're very generous about not minding me dabbling with this somewhat because I always praise them and I love them and I want people to subscribe to them. So
I would think Jordan Walker's an athlete.
Oh, yes,
so he's
yes.
not that what
Right.
you're describing. It's not Gorman, and the next big hitter for them, I think, would be Yepez.
There you go. That's our winner.
All right.
Now, when I was reading that, and I could read it again, although it'd probably be boring to read it again, but, big, strong, thick-bodied kid, power, handles the bat, doesn't run very well, limited defensively. There's your DH, boys and girls, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to see him. I don't know when. We will see him a lot. He will be getting a lot of at-bats this year coming up, next season as well, and beyond. He will have every chance to kind of grab that DH job and run with it because he is built as a DH. He looks like a DH. He runs like a DH. He fields like a DH. That's okay as long as he. What he did at AAA last year when he got up there, he destroyed. He's a right-handed hitter, Yepez. He destroyed not only left-handed pitchers, which you would expect. He actually did more damage and more destruction against right-handed pitchers. So I'm not even convinced that he'll have to be a platoon guy. So there's your DH. When I'm reading that, I was smiling because the Cardinals are gaga over Yepez, more so than Keith Law and other people who evaluate prospects. And I'm not knocking Keith Law.
Right.
But the Cardinals have their own metrics on things and their own insights into players, and they are absolutely gaga about Yepez. And that's why they've already put him on the 40-man roster. And that's why if one person could have gotten a timely hit to beat the Dodgers, Yepez would have been in the National League Division Series the next round. He probably would have played, if nothing else but to pinch hit in the postseason had they gotten out of that wild card game. The Cardinals are nuts over this guy, so I think it's funny. So I like to read that because it just kind of cracked me up.
I love the description. Look, if he can hit, he plays in the major leagues. Especially on this team, because there's plenty of defense to go around to offset a guy who, if he can be a difference-making bat, you play him and you let him DH. I'm not going to say he's Yordan Alvarez, but if he can be that type of impact bat in your lineup, that's the perfect spot for him, right?
Absolutely. And so since you mentioned Luken Baker,
the big shooter,
he absolutely is the epitome of a big shooter. Keith Law said he hit 28 homers for AA Springfield, but the 6'4", 280-pound TCU alum has no position. And his .324 on-base percentage last year isn't likely to land him a DH job. Come on, Law. Don't be giving up on my boy.
Not yet. Come on.
Don't give up on my boy, man. The shooter will start drawing some walks. He just had to make his presence known by ripping home runs.
Yes.
So anyway, so anyway, there's some other guys that he mentioned when he was on the show with us last week, but I blew it. I dropped the ball because I forgot to ask Keith Law about Yepez, so I wanted to make sure to bring that up today and read that. But, we know that he had 4 Cardinals on his top 100, Gorman, Walker, Libator, and the catcher Herrera. But other people, as he said last week, so I don't feel like I'm stealing any proprietary information here because he said it on the show. Mason Wynn, the shortstop and pitcher, they're not sure what to do with him. He's got like this lightning bat speed, and he's got like the maximum grade on his arm, and he could Keith says if they used him as a pitcher, he would routinely hit the upper 90s, throwing close to 100 miles an hour. But they see his bat speed, and it's just ridiculous. They got scouts like almost weeping because his bat is so fast, except there has not been the result yet. And I wonder a little bit, and also they were talking about Keith Law's talking about his speed, Mason Wynn. I just wonder whether, I like the idea that they're keeping options open about what his future is. I wonder if somehow it's kind of hindering his development. And I'm not rigid in my thinking. I'm not saying, hey, you got to pick one position or the other. Mm-hmm. When you can throw 98 and you've got like lightning bat speed, there's no reason to make a decision about what you're going to do this early. But I'm just saying, I would like to see some results. That part of it hasn't been there yet. But he's still very young.
That's a lot of attributes to mess with, right? You go, well, let's just give it another year and see where it goes. I'm not saying he doesn't have the body type of Shohei Ohtani, but there's some ability there that you kind of go, oh, he could probably do both if he can, refine some of that.
And Keith Law, concluded his review of Mason Wynn, who he has as the Cardinals' 5th best prospect, and we know who the top 4 were because we just mentioned him. Mm-hmm. He said that some scouts see his hit tool and they think his approach is really noisy, and he's so raw with his swing, even though the bat speed's just amazing. He might not be able to refine his swing in a way that allows him to be as good as he could be. Keith Law said a lot of scouts says if he hits it all, he'll be an above-average regular. But he said there are a lot of scouts who doubt that he'll ever do so, and they would like to see him go back to pitching, where he has huge arm strength but a violent delivery that would make him a very likely reliever. So Mason Wynn is certainly one of their most intriguing prospects. There's no question about it.
I remember when they drafted him and they kind of said the same thing. And, well, he can do this and he can do that. We're going to let him do both. And I was like, all right, let him do both. Let's see where it takes him.
And the Reds drafted that kid, Green, who does both.
Yes.
And he'll be in the majors this coming season. And as a pitcher, I think he did make a decision. I think he is capable. He was viewed as a big-time bat as well. So usually these guys do make decisions or the team makes it for them. And Keith Law also mentioned this kid, and I wanted to follow up on it when he was with us. So again, I don't think I'm stealing too much of his information here because he shared it last week. That kid that they drafted in the second round in 21, Joshua Baez, the high school kid from Boston. He says he showed huge tools, but he barely faced any quality pitching. He's talking about in high school. He has 70 raw power. The highest is 80, by the way. 70 raw power, and he swings hard all the time, leading to his swing and miss both on the showcase circuit and after he signed last summer. Although he at least shows the bat speed to catch up to velocity. He's an average runner with a plus arm who should be an above-average defender in right field, which is where he will likely end up as he moves up the ladder. He's a high-risk, high-reward hitter, but the Cardinals nailed one of those picks the year before in Jordan Walker. And Keith Law concludes, I can understand them returning to the well. So that's a good report as well. He's very, very raw, but he'll have time. There's a lot of natural talent there. So I just wanted to share some of that. But before we leave this topic alone, I tell you what, though, the number one farm system, belongs to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the way Keith Law talked about it, it was really actually almost funny because he just said it's just, even with him, who doesn't express like just shock and awe more, hardly ever. He's very level-headed. He was just saying like he just can't believe that they have a farm system like this and just how great it is and just how they're so they obviously spent a ton of money on it. International scouting, the draft. They have more people working on this, more people out on the field than any team in the majors. They just throw money at it, but they also hire the best people. They're eagle-eyed. They know players. They know talent. Their evaluations are on the mark. And he just said this is just a monstrous farm system. And, was basically making the point, it's like it's not supposed to work like this. If you have like a great team on the field at the major league level, you're supposed to be kind of hurting in your farm system. But they just get stronger and stronger and stronger. Let me see if I can read this real quick, my friend. He said every player in their top 10 was in broader consideration for his top 100. He says, I don't make a long list, he said, but if I did one with 200 names on it, the Dodgers' top 10 would make it. He just talked and again, how deep it is, how many players there are, how they're just so much better than everybody else in baseball who does this, including Tampa Bay, although Tampa Bay is still very good. So yeah, you got to tip your cap to the Dodgers. I mean, they're owned by not one billionaire, but a team of billionaires. They have all kinds of money. They can do whatever the hell they want, but they hire the best people and they put the work into scouting and they really get after it. And I can't hate on the Dodgers for that. I mean, they make great use of their resources, and that way they just continue to funnel elite talent to the major leagues. So, for the Cardinals or anyone else in the National League with aspirations, yes, October is a dice roll. October has nothing to do with the regular season, but it's going to be a long time where we're going to be talking about, can anybody in the National League take down the Dodgers? And it's a fair question every year, because some people say, well, what are you talking about? I mean, Atlanta won it last year. That's not the point. October lightning strikes and all that stuff, that always is in play. But in terms of the capability and the talent and the constant roster churn that just brings more and more elite talent to the big club, the Dodgers are going to be the team to beat like every single year. It doesn't mean that they're always – of course they're not always going to win it. We're just saying they're going to be the team to beat going into every new seasons in the foreseeable future with this kind of farm system.
They really do. I mean, I was just trying to go through the roster. I mean, Walker Buehler, Urias. We know the Dustin May kid was injured. That's 3 plus arms that came through their system in recent years. That they, they just find ways. That kid Gavin Lux is going to be a hitter at some point. He's going to figure it out. But he was one of the highest touted hitters in minor leagues 2 years ago, coming out of the minors. I mean, you just go down the list. To your point, and to Keith's point, top teams aren't supposed to have that kind of talent just come up through the system to just fill holes when you need it. But they've got a lot of it. I mean, Bellinger came through their system. He's only 25. He had a down year, but we know what he has been in the past. Seager was you can just chalk it up. It's Will
one
Smith,
after another.
I just one after another.
So I couldn't find what he said at the beginning of this, but let me just read this, and it's not long. He said about the Dodgers farm system, which is number one on the list. Quote, the Dodgers system is just ridiculous. They are hitting on every cylinder right now. They have depth and ceiling and pitching and position players, near-in prospects, long-term players. I don't think any organization can rival their consistent success in drafting, international scouting, player development, pro scouting right now, which is probably the last thing fans of the 4 other NL West teams want to hear. For that matter, any fans anywhere wants to hear it. And it's funny because, when the word got out about this, in one of the forums where people talk Cardinals baseball, there was almost like, of course, the first reaction is rage, fake rage, Well, how come DeWitt can't have the farm system like this? And I'm not even saying it's actually a legitimate question. But Derek Gould, in his chat had an interesting disclosure about how it isn't that the Cardinals are dumb or that they forgot how to win, and because they actually do win. It's just they win a lot. It's just they don't have a team that is as highly capable of going deep in the postseason as they've had in past postseasons. So they're missing that oomph. They're missing that pitcher. They're missing this. They're missing that. Just a couple pieces that could just make them a lot better. And Derek Gould, and it is something we've talked about. The Cardinals, and I know I've written about it, but not for a while. The Cardinals were in front of most teams, if not everybody, and that's no hype. They were. In terms of when DeWitt went out and brought in Jeff Luhnow, and everyone thought he's lost his mind, but Jeff Luhnow put in a new system, in terms of scouting, drafting, development, getting more money, more value for the money in terms of developing players. They had a real eye. They had a great system for finding talent, young talent, and they were pretty much ahead of everybody in terms of this new way of evaluating talent and using metrics and using different measurements and all this other stuff. And the rest of baseball caught up with them. It isn't that the Cardinals, just all of a sudden turned dumb. They just had an advantage over many, if not most, if not all organizations. they were ahead of the curve, and they kind of gave it back because other organizations saw what they were doing and they were seeing the success, and they were like, well, we need to have an analytics department, but except we're going to make ours bigger and stronger and fund it more heavily and everything else. So the Cardinals just lost ground after sort of being one of the industry leaders in the new way of evaluating talent and putting a roster together. They were an industry leader. There's no question about it. And then they slipped behind, and they're still trying to catch up. And they've made progress, but they're still trying to catch up. So I think it's a legitimate question. As long as people aren't just getting into the whole fake rage, we're all victims. DeWitt's a disgrace. I wish he would sell the team. All that kind of garbage, right? It's a legitimate question to ask why they allowed it to happen where they had an advantage and it slipped away, because the money we're talking about, to me, ain't all that. We're not talking about a fortune here. I mean, yeah, it's a sizable investment, but, we're not talking about like for them to keep their analytics department and their scouting and all that stuff ahead of the curve. It would have required you got to pump $100 million into that. No, it's nothing like that at all. So I'm disappointed that they did slip because they had such a good advantage there for a while. And I do believe that that's one of the reasons why, again, they have a really good team. Anybody who says they don't is just being a liar because they want to have the fake outrage. They have a really good team, but they have not put together an entire team from the standpoint, all right, now give us a team that is more capable, at least, of winning in the postseason, that isn't as vulnerable going into the postseason. That's the difference. How much is that is money, or how much is that approach? I would say the answer is both, because you got to reinvest in your own product. And no, that doesn't mean just throwing money around because you feel you have to prove yourself to media fans by doing something stupid. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about making smart decisions with your money.
Well, to start off, this whole process that you talked about, if you think about it, Bernie, when Jeff Luhnow was brought aboard and all of that, the game's changed since then.
Yeah.
The valuation process has changed since then. Even, everything has got to be adjusted. I mean, I guess you can almost, you don't want to use exactly 10 years, but about every 10 years or so, the game morphs into something else. I mean, it just does. And we're seeing it now. It's going into a different direction in terms of pitcher usage and bullpen usage, and also, what makes a lineup and how do you use your roster differently. I mean, it's going right before our eyes here in the last 4 years, not even 4 years, I'd say the last 3 years or so.
Right.
It's definitely changed. So part of that process then has got to be the Cardinals readjusting and thinking differently about how they're going to put this baseball team together, how you use your roster. And, going back to the Dodgers, I mean, they've utilized everything properly. One, they have the most revenue, but to your point, they've put together a better farm system. They've also, at the major league level, Bernie, done a better job of evaluating what fits the roster, what veteran guys can you pick up to fit. Again, I gave all the young players, but now you go into the Max Muncies, the Chris Taylors, those guys that were brought in and go, wow, those guys just fit perfectly for what we want to do.
Even Justin Turner.
Yeah, there's another one.
He was out there for anybody, yes. Really.
And then they did spend big. They did spend money on Betts. They did spend money on Max Scherzer, but they utilized all of that. Cardinals are trying to catch up to that. I don't think they'll ever spend as much money as the Dodgers, but that evaluation process is, in flux right now, and that's what they're working on.
The Dodgers also, the international scouting is notable. The Cardinals have made inroads, and they've spent a lot of money on international scouting, mm-hmm. and they have signed some really good players, but they never get the best player, and they never get into the deep end of the pool. And to me, that is frustrating.
Yeah.
They were right there with the White Sox
was it Jimenez?
Louis Robert.
Oh, Robert, that's who it was. Yep.
Louis Robert. His name's pronounced 30 different ways.
I think it is Robert. You're right, but it sounds better when you say Robert.
The White Sox had the inside track. In fairness to DeWitt and Mozeliak, they did. And again, I mean, if people want to deny it, you can, but you're wrong. Because in fact, I recently read a story about this because the White Sox signed another. They spent a fortune on another player from Cuba, for example. They got, I think, the best international player, or maybe number 2 on the list of this past cycle, 2 or 3. But the guy's a monster, just like Louis Robert or Robert is, whatever his name is. Again, stupid. I'm dumb. I'm sorry. The Cardinals were right there, and look, the White Sox had the inside track because of Jose Abreu and because of the fact that Abreu could be a recruiter. You know, he's an icon in Cuban baseball, and a kid like Robert, you know, was very impressed by that. He could be his teammate. So for a Cardinals fan to pretend that's not a factor, that's just silly because it's an obvious factor. That, however, the younger Gurriel, for example, the one in Toronto, the Cardinals finished second, a close second on that one, and they finished a close second on several others. They never get the big fish. They get good players, but they don't get the big fish. And that disappoints me because after all these years, you know, and because they're so active in the international markets, but we're mostly talking about the Caribbean nations and everything like that. It's just disappointing. They haven't gotten the biggest catch. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're talking about. That separates the Dodgers. Teams like the White Sox, you know, Tampa Bay. Some of these teams have just hit the jackpot over and over again. The Cardinals have been in position. That's frustrating. They've been in great position to hit the jackpot, and they've had some good scores, but they've never really hit the jackpot. And that's kind of a waste of, when you think about their presence and how long they've been doing this and the initiative of being more aggressive in terms of the Caribbean nations and South America and all that stuff. It's a shame that they just haven't sort of taken it to the limit, but they're conservative, and they're conservative except for the one thing that they've been burned on repeatedly, which is giving contract extensions to their own players, especially those that are aging, or signing aging players who are in decline. Dexter Fowler, for example. In other words, if you're going to take a risk, take it on the kid that the White Sox signed, who's now, basically a world-class, center fielder. He was hurt last year. Robert, we're talking about.
Yep.
Don't give that money to Matt Carpenter, okay? Don't waste it on Dexter Fowler. When you got a guy that you are slobbering over because you're convinced he's going to be a superstar, and the Cardinals were slobbering over him, well, get the hell out there and go get him. Take your best shot, even if the White Sox had the advantage of Jose Abreu working as a recruiter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a time when you got to go, okay, it's time to step in the deep end and go all in.
They're always looking for bargains, and there's nothing wrong with that because they've actually found some really good bargains, good players that have helped the major league team. But it's the bargains are terrific. But go get one of the true heavyweights, even if it's going to cost you more money. That's all I'm saying. You don't have to do it all the time, but if you really love a player, an international prospect, you really are convinced, well, go get them. That's all I'm trying to say. Do it every now and then. You don't have to even do it every year. The Dodgers do it every year.
Yeah, they do.